At this stage, you should be familiar with different layouts and grid structures, and you should be ready to start using flexbox. Let's explore a few practical examples of how you can use it. In the next few minutes, you will explore what the 3 most common uses of flexbox are. As mentioned earlier, flexboxes are more suitable to use for simple layouts or designing simple elements in a page. In line with that idea, let's explore a few commonly used design elements that you see on a page. You will discover simple ways in which you can utilize flexboxes for binding elements together or creating an easy layout. Let's explore the 3 most common uses of flexboxes in CSS. The first application of flexbox that you will cover that is commonly used is a search bar. You can use flex in search bars because it ties up all the elements, such as the small search icon, the search input area, and the submit button. Next, you can create the navigation bar using flex, which consists of several different layouts. And it makes your navigation bar highly responsive on different devices. Finally, another type of flexbox that is commonly used is an image gallery. Flex is helpful here as it can realign itself as you change the size of the window. In the next few minutes, you will discover how to create these flexboxes to ensure a simple layout. In the first example of a flexbox file, I will create a search bar. I add a reference to the CSS file in the head section of the HTML page. After that, I add content inside the body section of our HTML code. I first create a container class with a div tag. Inside this container, I have 3 different elements, which are the search icon, the search box where I type my search, and finally the submit button. In the CSS code, I first write rules for the container, then for the search icon, the search box, and finally for the button. Most of the properties defined here are settings for the alignment of the selectors. There are just a few important things to take note of. The display property I use is inline flex instead of flex, which makes the flex container behave like an inline element. Another property to take note of is the overflow. The overflow property clips the overflowing content, which in this case will be the text I enter in the search query. Then I add the properties for the icon and the search box. Finally, I add the properties for the search button. Let's remove this CSS code momentarily to check how the output displays without it. Although all the elements are there, the page is standard and plain. I add the code back to the CSS file and check the output one more time. Now the search box displays the properties that I defined in my CSS file. Notice that when I change the size of the page, the search area doesn't change. Another place where flexbox is used quite frequently is in navigation menus. In this case, I created an unordered list that consists of 4 items. Notice that in my CSS code, I use something called a star or universal selector. The universal selector applies the rules to every element in my CSS code. I use this to clear any formatting that is browser specific. Now I define the rules for the container. It's important to notice that I use the flex flow, which is a shorthand property specifying the direction of the flex container and its behavior for wrapping. Another important property is justify content, which aligns the flexible container's items along the main axis. In this case, I have set it to stretch. Since the individual elements are part of the container, I applied the rules both to the container and to the element, which are the list items, anchor tag, and so on. It's also important to notice that the page is responsive. So, as the size of the browser window gets smaller, the items stack on top of each other, and if I expand the window, it changes to a standard horizontal navigation menu. One final flexbox example that I will demonstrate is a responsive image gallery. All the elements for the gallery is in the body of the HTML file. There is a div element with a class container that consists of 6 images that are saved inside the project folder. Now let's open the CSS file. First, I remove all browser-specific settings that may be there by using the star selector, just like I did earlier. I set the value of both the margin and the padding to 0. I then reset the basic alignment options for the images by setting the border to 0. Next, let's focus on the container. First, I set the value of display to flex. Then I add the flex wrap property, which determines whether the flex items should be forced in one line or should wrap over multiple lines. Next, I justify the content property, which aligns the flexible container items on the horizontal main axis. I set it to space dash between. Finally, I add some padding. Let's inspect the output. The output window is narrow at the moment, so the 6 images are stacked on top of each other, but when I expand the window, they spread out. One can notice the effect better in a browser, so I copy the link and paste it into my browser. When I change the size of the browser window, it is clear that the alignment of these images is responsive. These are just some of the ways in which you use flexboxes to provide responsiveness to websites and bind different elements together on web pages. You should now be more familiar with some simple ways in which you can use flexboxes to bind elements together to create an easy, responsive layout on your web page. Good job!